We were playing, I think, Hyderabad in the tournament in Vijayawada. VVS Lakshman, who later on became a legend, was part of the team. And I used to be a off spinner for Kerala. Getting VVS out, I believe, probably in the mid wicket position when he had scored 153.
What seems to be those things what you're doing which is kind of helping you in your mental health?
Problems or situations also have this tendency to solve by itself without you doing much. I think being a sports person helps you withstand the difficulties, the challenges, the hardships when you go through that process. I mean, some of the stadiums that were around in Eton is as good as worn out, dilapidated stadiums that you could see anywhere the rest of the world. But there are so many other people out there training, enjoying their runs. So there's a community feeling out there where people are ready to help each other. Even the top Indian 5 marathon runners wouldn't be training together.
Yeah.
Whereas you have the NN running team or some of the world's best training day in and day out together.
It's a boring life. It's the same template. Yeah, you got to get up in the morning, do the same things, go back early in the bed, but you're happy with it.
In any activity, what I felt was as age progresses, it's going to be very difficult to unlearn and then learn new things. But sometimes it's worth, and you need patience.
As someone is saying, the expectations are the root cause of misery in life. So if you can nail that out, you're perhaps you're the most sorted person.
Hi, welcome to The Other Side. I'm your host, Dilip, an entrepreneur and an endurance athlete. In this podcast, we will explore the experiences of high-performing individuals while unpacking their mental and physical fitness routines that took them to where they are. Hi, welcome to another new episode of the podcast. Today's guest is Vijay Venugopal. Vijay is the co-founder and CEO of Fast&Up, one of India's largest and fastest growing nutrition brand. Now, Vijay has a very fascinating background. He's been a corporate executive for many years and now an entrepreneur. But what's most interesting about him is he's perhaps one of India's fastest running CEOs. We're going to unpack that part, also how being a father, an entrepreneur, it takes time to train at a very sub-elite level. So there's a lot to unpack today. I hope you have fun listening and watching. Let's get into the podcast. So this podcast is supported by the good folks at Rainmatter. Rainmatter Health is an initiative to invest in founders and entrepreneurs who are creating health and fitness startups. If you're one of those founders and you want some kind of support, be that investment or beyond, reach out to Rainmatter. You can go to the website rainmatter.com and you'll find more details. Okay, so before we get to the podcast, I have a request. There's a lot of work which goes into get this podcast to you, and I get a lot of feedback from many people that has been useful to them. So thank you for everyone who has reached out to me and given me their feedback. It would mean a lot to me if you can subscribe to this podcast in whichever channel or podcast platforms you are watching or listening. If it's on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, please subscribe to the channel. Send me your feedback that helps me improve and get better to the next podcast. You can reach out to me on email, Twitter, LinkedIn, or just send me a comment on this YouTube and I would reply back to you. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's get to the podcast.
So Vijay, born and brought up in Kerala, considering your age, I know you're in your between the 45-50 age category. So the 70s and 80s kids, sports was not a common affair, right? Most of the parents would say go to studies and academics and tuitions. And you've had a very outlierish kind of an upbringing. You were very good in sports. You're as well good in academics. I want you to talk about how that exposure to sports has stemmed who you are today, both professionally and personally. And do you think that involvement on sports really anchored to who you are today?
This is interesting, Dilip, because we grew up in the 80s, in fact. 80s was when I think I spent a lot of time at school. And luckily, being from Kerala, those days Kerala used to be a powerhouse of sports and athletics. I still remember the PT Usha, the Shiny Wilsons, and early 90s, I think we, Kerala won the Santosh Trophy and the whole state had a holiday and whatnot, right? The only thing that Kerala lacked at that point of time was cricket. But so in fact, the whole ecosystem and whole environment in Kerala helped anybody who is living there at that point of time inculcate sports into their livelihood. Added to that, there are two other facts. One, having a supportive, parents, even those days, who knew sports can be helpful. And two, the school that you studied in. So I think these two were instrumental in me being part of sports. Apart from the fact that once you tend to get into sports, you do something good and you get on with it, right? So that has been a mainstay for me right from school into college and even beyond that. And I think more often than not, it has made me more rounded, more competitive in my own way, more, I would say, stick to the principles, stick to hard work, stick to discipline in life, which has all rubbed off even when you start working professionally. And I think late in the life, late in my career, I started a little bit of entrepreneurial journey a little late in the 40s. I think being a sports person helps you withstand the difficulties, the challenges, the hardships when you go through that process. So all in all, I think sports, is very integral, and you have to relive that journey. Probably, I would put more precedence to sports than even academics.
Wow. So in your case, my curiosity went a little ahead when I read that sport was not just one sport. I mean, it was just not one sport activity. You pretty much had your hands and legs into multiple sports, right? You were into football as well, a bit of track and field, badminton, basketball. At what point did you realize that you were good at sports? And I want you to talk about your stint where you also went to state and national level cricket team, right? So what was that point when you realized that you're really good at sport, and what perhaps made you, not pursue it professionally maybe?
So I think during school, fourth or fifth is when you start dabbling in different kinds of sports, right? At the end of the day, if you are able to go out and play every day, that means that you have some inclination to do sports, and you continue and you start participating in various events, various competitions. So the only sport that I felt or two sports I was not good at the school level was table tennis, which I still can't play because it's too small for me to play a game. And I'm not so good or not very bad at basketball. And basketball, incidentally, was the school game, like hockey or cricket is for somebody else.
The primary sport.
Yeah, primary sport. So every time, so we used to have a championship in the school, and every time the basketballers used to perform, they used to be the mega stars. So for me, that was not an option because I was never going to get there. But inherently, cricket became a little bit of a passion at that point of time. I got fascinated listening to the radio commentary, seeing the men play on the whites, reading the papers and how the game went, etc. So I went through that process and got lucky to get into a district team. Because I think being a wicketkeeper in those days was they were not trained wicketkeepers. So if you put your name into it, there are high chances that you get selected. So I got into the district team at junior, under 12 or under 13 as a wicketkeeper. And once you get in, then the process becomes a little easier because you tend to start playing, etc. So cricket became a natural, I would say, a love and an affection in terms of sports. And that carried on till the time I was in 10th, maybe 12th. But looking back, I think at that point of time, even a sport like cricket had just a unidimensional kind of opportunity. There was no IPL, there was no T20. So they're just getting into the state team, and then you play the Ranji Trophy, and then get into the national team or whatever. And it was as hard as it is now to get into those teams. So I think it was sheer lack of maybe effort to kind of put in that work to manage both at that point of time. And like everyone else, I drifted back into academics, keeping sport or cricket as a hobby. But looking back, the way I think amateur runners are training these days, if you had put in the same effort at that point in time, I'm sure you could have dabbled in both at a very decent level.
Yeah. So multitasking essentially. Like if you can be as passionate about your work towards, the other side of yours, which could be running or cricket or soccer for someone, possibly someone can treat it to a certain extent. So talking about the cricket stint, right? When I wanted to get some more trivia about you, I was told that you have this, unspoken achievement of getting one of our best Indian, national cricket players bowled. Who was that, and what was that experience about?
So this is interesting again, but there used to be this tournament called the Nutrient Superstar Trophy, which used to be the under 12 tournament for South Indian states. So Kerala used to be the bottom of the table. So we used to be there up to make up the numbers, and every time, say, a Hyderabad or a Tamil Nadu come to bat against us, they would score mammoth amount of runs, maybe 200, 300, etc. We were playing, I think, Hyderabad in the tournament in Vijayawada. So VVS Lakshman, uh, who later on became a legend, was part of the team which had Hyderabad in it. And I remember they were batting first, and I think VVS scored almost 153, 112, 153. And imagine the amount of runs he would have scored, and the fatigue he would have endured. So I had already graduated from wicket keeping to off spin by that time. And I used to be a off spinner for Kerala. And I got, I would say, a little lucky at that point of time, getting VVS out, I believe, probably in the mid wicket position when he had scored 153. So later on, when he started getting into under 19s and the Indian team, and obviously the famous Calcutta innings that he and Dravid had, obviously you look back and feel happy about it.
Yeah.
So that's the small trivia around.
Yeah, great. No, so I don't want to put you on spot, but uh, who perhaps for you would be all-time greatest test player for India?
It's difficult for me to kind of answer that question, but I think from the person I am, the kind of the way I lead my life, I think maybe someone like Rahul Dravid was closest to who I think symbolizes what I would follow in terms of patiently building the innings, working towards a certain goal. I mean, those are all characteristics I still believe in, and I think he's probably a much better test player than a one-dayer or a T20. And even today, I still would love to watch a 5-day test match rather than a T20 game.
So funny. I'm not surprised you said Rahul Dravid because that was exactly what was in my mind that you are going to say Rahul Dravid, and that's partly because what I know of you,
Yeah.
and it also kind of defines that identity of who you are today. You're a marathoner, and marathon is all about your time on the field, your staying put, it's persistence, it's perseverance, it's endurance. And Rahul Dravid, of course, is perhaps the greatest example to resonate all of that characters. What's interesting for me is the fact that, because you had that well-rounded growing up years, I want to dip into the Fabricant family. How was it? Parents pro supportive, or did you have to go out and show them that you are cracking some milestone in sports and therefore you can spend time? What made them think that you can perhaps live a hybrid life of also being active in sports and also in academics?
So I think during those times, the 80s, so my father used to work with the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in Trivandrum. My mother is a housewife. So you had a lot of people in Trivandrum those days who were from outside Kerala or Trivandrum, having come to settle there and work there. Now, I also think and know that a lot of those people, parents, really wanted to give the best for their children. I mean, so is the case now, but I think more so in 80s because wealth hadn't been generated to that extent then. So every parent wanted the best for their kid, and they would go out of the way to see and seek admission and put them to the good school. But post that, I think they were also equally worried that the kids don't go astray, they study well, because for them, getting to be an engineer or a doctor was the next normal path. So a lot of us, including me, the only thing that we had to show was that we never fail or we never do badly in academics. As long as that criteria is maintained, you are free to do anything else. So I used to play sport. I used to stay back almost every other day, and come back late from home, from school. But the only thing that I needed to guarantee was I should make sure my class teacher or the principal never calls my parents to school, which would only happen if you are not attentive in class,
Yeah.
or if you fail in an exam, etc. So as long as this criterion is done, you are okay. Uh, Getting something out of sports, winning something, or achieving something was probably secondary, because I don't think parents those days never thought any kid or any child would have any sporting career. So that was a normal case. So for them, you would definitely go into being a doctor or an engineer. So these were the criterion that they had to see you meeting.
Uh, so you lived a typical, I would say, classic uh, middle class Indian boy growing up, go to the best engineering school, go and do your MBA from a top tier, and then get a multinational corporate job, right? But a side parallel which has also I've noticed is that sports also kind of being a parallel anchor to whatever you did, right? Maybe you kept on changing the sport. From cricket it went to football, then at time it was badminton, now of course running, which we have to go into depth. But what made you go back always and dip into that parallel track? And I ask that more specifically because at least 8 out of 10 people we see around us, there is no parallel identity to many, right? I mean, they're mostly going to work and coming back. Uh, these days, of course, now you have social media. So that's another parallel track for many, right? So what was that anchor for you that sports continued to be as a parallel track all through your growing up years?
Well, I've not really thought about it, but while you were asking me that question, I was just quickly thinking what could have been the reason. Now, I think the first answer would be that it still makes me a full person. I think sports or playing something has always been integral, so you can't take that out of me. I mean, even though the level doesn't matter, because there are so many people who are doing great. So that I think will still continue to be a driving force. The other aspect, when I look back, is that sports also gave me an identity, if not more, but equal to whatever I am otherwise. So if I look back at school, cricket gave me an identity. Even today, if I have to connect, people would still respect me as what I did through cricket at that point of time, right? Athletics, I still used to practice in school because that gave me an identity. And for me, I remember I always used to end up in third, fourth, because there are superior athletes at that point of time. But for me, that dream was to, how do I go up and get the number two or number one, right? Uh, uh, when I went to college, engineering college, as you know, nobody does sports, nobody does athletics. I mean, we used to have a cricket team which we were good at, but nobody did athletics. But I still remember went and did athletics there just to prove to myself that I could do it, and because you have a parallel identity there. Post graduation, nobody plays, but we formed a cricket team and used to play against some of the good teams in Delhi, right? Uh, Corporate, again, I still played because that gave me a parallel identity in the company that I was working in as a cricket player. Running, as you know, in the last 6, 7 years or 12 years, has given me a parallel identity. Also, in the last 7 years, obviously, has been intertwined with the profession that I've chosen to follow. So, in a way, when I look back, I think it's an identity that I have had. It gives me that fullness, and also finally the happiness to what I am today.
So it exactly resonates to why we are sitting together, right? I mean, like I was telling you when I reached out to say, Vijay, I want to talk to you. The original idea for me to have these conversations with people like you and others is essentially that everyone has that other side. And that's very unique to who they are, to the primary identity what they have. So when you, as you grow up, in your college, it's more about grades and the branch of engineering you are, in your job, it's more about where you are flying out for your on site or what salary you got. And as you grow up, that other side doesn't kind of evolve. But there's always an hidden other side, which I personally felt always anchors your primary identity, right? So for someone who probably might be listening, watching, and thinking that he or she might have that identity which is on the fringe, or someone who might not have that resonation that what's their other side, what do you think would be a starting point for them to kind of dip in and kind of find out what that identity is and how they could perhaps go to pursue, regardless what their age is? Because in your case, that identity, like you said, has kind of made you well-rounded, personally, professionally. And I would assume it's kind of a superpower to you, right? So for someone, a young person or someone in mid-30s, early 40s, 50s, whoever wants come and ask you like, hey Vijay, what's that protocol I can find out? What you would have to say to them?
So, we have two daughters at home. So the rules or the guidance that I would give them is no different from what I would give a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or even a 40-year-old, right? I think a lot of us have inhibitions of even exploring various things. So the first starting point is, I think, going out and exploring stuff. So it's the same thing that we tell our younger daughter, that you have to first go and participate. I remember in school, I used to, just for the sake of it, even though I may not have been good at it, or still go and write those essays, still participate in some poetry competition, right? Still do a debating competition, right? You explore and finally you realize that you probably are not good in certain things. You are good in certain other things, and probably more important than that, passionate in certain things. So I think first start exploring. A lot of times, what I feel is, especially which happened to me to an extent, in the 20s, right? You are fresh out of college. You're still not gotten into the family mode. You're not into 30s, etc. You're still wanting to enjoy those lives. You get so much immersed in your normal routine of the on-sites, of work, etc. You forget to even explore the other side of things. And then suddenly you realize that, years have gone past. Now I want to explore. Right. So I think if there's a conscious attempt to keep exploring different avenues, then I'm sure you will get into something which you will find happiness with, and then you can jump on from one thing to another.
So part of the exploration, when I was reading about you, you had made a post that I think at some point of your career you took up to badminton. You made a post that you started training for badminton, and that there was one line said that learning new skills early in life is very important. Perhaps for you that was badminton, right? Now for a lot of people, badminton can be just a recreational sport, which in right way. I mean, you just go there to have fun. But then there is a nuanced skill involved in learning and in getting better, right? Why is so? How do you differentiate between taking an activity for the sake of activity and perhaps layering it, learning that as a skill to again grow in life in general?
So, talking about sports comes more naturally to me. So, these two instances that you have talked about was in a period when we were living in China, in Shanghai, from 2007 to 2010. If you remember, 2008 was also the period when China hosted the Olympics. So, there was a lot of activity around Olympics and stuff like that happening there. And China was also very strong in badminton and swimming, right? And we used to be there for 3 years. So, during the period that we were there, the Indians used to play badminton in the society that we had. So we used to book the courts from 5 to 8 or 9 every weekends, and used to have fun sessions out there, play games, etc. And there was also indoor swimming pool at that point of time. So I used to be a regular in both. But I was never I mean, I would say it's something that you learn while being a kid, and then you just practice it. So every time you get into the water, you will probably do a typical floating and get away with it. Badminton, you play in a certain way. So in both these sports, I started going for a little bit of training under Chinese. So I learned swimming a little bit more practically, the techniques of breathing and stuff like that then. In fact, the breaststroke was something that I learned then. Till that time, it was only the freestyle that I knew. When it came to badminton, even a simple fact that you're holding a racket in a certain way is something that has stayed with you for 30 years or 25 years. Uh, uh, a simple change of grip of the racket is something that you have to unlearn and then learn a new technique. It's not so easy. The way you, even badminton for that matter, when I was getting trained for those 1 or 2 months, the way you cover the court is an art in itself. Where you stand, how you move back to the different sides of the court was an art in itself, which I never knew or which I wanted to learn. And in any activity, what I felt was as age progresses, it's going to be very difficult to unlearn and then learn new things. But sometimes it's worth, and you need patience because the results are not going to be fast. And a lot of times you would go back to doing what you did because that will give you that immediate point, right?
Yeah.
But it will not help you in that midterm to
Yeah.
long term. And right now, one of the discussions that I have with my daughter is on cadence. So I know cadence while running is important, but at the age of 47, it's quite difficult to change your cadence. Uh, and it requires a lot of mind activation, training, and and perseverance to get that going. So there are always going to be small things in whichever sport or activity that you pursue, which can be improved, and it will take a little bit of a learning to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely attest to it because talking about swimming, I know that for me, unlearning is a bigger challenge than learning a new thing because there are a lot of things which I'm doing is technically and tactically not right, which is not good for my learning. But that's partly because that was that raw ability of mine to see what swimming was like. I've realized that staying in the water doesn't mean that you're a swimmer. You've got to kind of go through a certain distance to kind of prove you who you are as a swimmer, right? And for sure I can attest that because it's very hard to unlearn something and learn something, right? um, which is, I mean, because you moved on in different sports, and you are a very skill oriented guy. I mean, you're trying to get better in each sport. Was sport a means? I mean, I don't know. Was sports a means for you to stay fit during those times, or gives me an impression that you wanted to be competitive and you want to ace the sport, and therefore you want to get better in whatever you do. So, what was that character like? I mean, because for most of the people, as they grow, like I said, it's just a means and tool to stay fit, maybe burn some calories. What was it for you?
So staying fit is always going to be one of the reasons, right? I mean, who doesn't want to stay fit and healthy and be active, right? Uh, but right from childhood or from very young stage, uh, so one of the things that's you talked about skill, right? So there is skill, you can have power, you can have strength, etc. in a game. Uh, but when you don't have power, and I remember watching tennis those days, you had people like Ramesh Krishnan, who will not have the power, but he had the skill to play, right? And he would tactfully win those points, say in a Wimbledon or some of the big major tournaments. So there was a skill element developed. When you play Test cricket, like say, we talked about Rahul Dravid, for
Yeah.
example.
Even Lakshman for that
even
matter.
VVS, for example. I mean, the immediate thing that comes to your mind is skill, right? So growing up, cricket, when even the early days, I realized that I was not as powerful as some of the others around. I mean, I couldn't hit those lofty sixes, even the fours. So the only way you can score is to craft those runs in a skillful way and build those innings, and that becomes a template for you every time that you do things, right? Uh, so that basis of learning to develop those skills has stayed with me, right? So whenever I look at a sport, I think everyone mostly would be interested if they are succeeding in it. The moment you don't succeed, you either kind of back off, and that's why maybe table tennis I've never been able to get back to it, because I still don't enjoy, because 50% of the time the ball is going out of the table. So in sports or in areas where I think I have a reasonably good chance, where I'm developing something or improving, and I'm passionate about it, I like it, I tend to build my skills around it. Power and strength is something that, if I'm on a scale of 1 to 10, if I'm at 6 or 7, I think I should be able to do pretty okay, because that's somewhere I would never be at 10.
So essentially, so the cue I'm getting is that for someone to, to improve in whatever they do, you got to measure it. So measuring the outcome is more important. And like you said, for some people it's that high, that how you measure your progress. For some people it's for the sake of showing up and doing a next activity and coming back, right? So that's a very interesting segue to get into running, which is your identity for at least the past 8 to 10 years now. So you started running probably around 2011, 12ish,
Yeah.
right? So almost 10 to 11 years of running career you've got. How many, any count how many marathons you've done?
Unfortunately, I don't jot it down too much, but maybe around 14 to 15
14,
marathons.
15 marathons, right? So it might be odd for me to say, but that's not awfully too many marathons for a typical person. Like, I mean, these days I see people end up doing at least 5, 6 marathons in a year. So in that sense, you're not. So I'm sure there's a methodical runner behind that to understand how many marathons you do in a year. And I want to break that out. So you're a ace marathoner. You have this, accomplishment of doing X number of sub 3 marathon. I think the count is what, 8?
8, yeah.
8 sub 3. So not many people perhaps would know the accolade or the that credential of doing sub 3 marathon, which is huge. That's all. I mean, they're probably less than maybe between 80 to 100 people in India who can do who have done sub 3 marathon, so far. To do consistently sub 3 marathon at that count, what, there would be less than maybe a handful of people in India right now. You're one of them. Which means you're very much dialed into that sport now, which means you're constantly developing that skill right now, and you're trying to get better at it. And you said you're 47, and you're not stopping. You're only getting better with age. So as a marathoner right now, how's your typical? So what are the mental models around your training? In the sense, how do you pick and choose your races? What's your mental model in terms of how you want to get better? And okay, let's get started. But how do you pick and choose your races? How many races do you do in a year?
So this goes back to how and when I started. So you're right. I started road racing around 2011 end or so. 2012 was when I started running and racing more regularly, I would say. So those were the days, if you remember, that there was still less running literature in India, less number of runners. So you had access to a few things, and the template at that point of time was full marathons, etc. You do 1 or 2 in a year, with less running events, etc. So somehow, I think I've not graduated into the current trend of doing more races, more marathons. I still go by that little bit of an old-fashioned way of doing 1 or 2 marathons in a year and do it well, build up to it and do it well. So that typically stays my mantra, and I don't think that will change even in the next 4 5 years. if at all I'm running till then. Simply because I think I feel as a person, I need so much time to recover, not just physically. I find recovering mentally from a marathon is much more important for me than just the physical aspect of recovery, right? In terms of a template, I think I've tried one or two different ways of running. The first part, I would say, for almost 7, 8 years, the model has been less mileage, I would say, and more of quality sessions. But as I've gotten a little older and I've gone out and started enjoying my runs, so more easy runs, but still with a focus around quality sessions. And I still feel that I would continue to do one or two full marathons in a year. I will do a few 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, and then gradually build up to the full marathon uh, and see how I can stay at a consistently good level as I do all of these things.
So that's a typical elite athlete mindset, right? I mean, there's a process to it, there's a structure to it, right? It's not very random. Um, and I want to ask you, right, what's your personal best? So what's your let's go with shorter distance to the longer. What's your 5K personal best?
Uh, I mean, I'm pretty bad at remembering a lot of these personal bests, but I think on a road, the 5K would have been maybe 18, 15 or something.
Okay, and 10K?
10K would have been again on road, maybe 37, 50 or something like that.
Half?
Half, incidentally, I did my best half while doing a 25K.
Okay.
That was around 121.
And full?
Full is 254.
254. So there's quite a lot of range in the athlete you are today. And I'm sure there's a lot of amount of structuring and introspection which has gone into kind of develop that. And when you look back, it's 12 years of work in there, right? For you today, how do you kind of structure your day, a typical day, and we can take a typical example of an season training when you have like a marathon coming up in 16 to 20 weeks up. How do you kind of design a typical day which is geared towards someone who is also training like a athlete, like a sub-elite athlete? At the same time, you also have a 9 to 6 endurance to take care, which is your work, right? So how do you design your typical day?
So one is, I mean, like all runners, serious runners, you would be knowing that you have only so many things to do in life that you would be totally committed to doing, right? When it comes to running, my usual runs have been around the morning. Until recently, my mileage around marathons was 60, 70 kilometers. So now I'm slightly experimenting with a little higher mileage of maybe 80, and my desire is to go up to a 100-kilometer week soon sometime. So with that template in mind, I would need a few more hours to be put into running, uh, which I plan, or I would rather be doing it mostly in the morning and occasional evening easy runs, and that's going to be the way I'm going to do it. But I think as you progress in running, as also in age, not that I didn't know about it, but I've now given more importance to also things like strength, etc., which now I do once or twice in a week, which I want to do continuously. I also hit the pool more for recovery once in a week, just to make sure that I had an injury late last season. I don't want that to come back. Uh, so this is broadly going to be my template while I get into this year of 2023. And in the first 4 to 3 months itself, I've seen that a lot of these things are working. And I'm hoping that as the season goes ahead, I would tend to mostly be at my best levels, if not better, what I've done in the past.
So this is possibly, I would say, 100% effort for someone who is training at an elite level, in the sense that that's typically a template. The difference would be intensity and, let's say, quality and the quantity, right? So the volume would increase for
Yeah.
an elite and the intensity would increase, right? But in a way, it's much more harder because you also have a 9 to 6 job to do, and then you also have a family, right? Uh, so load balancing is a big question for me, because I'm also kind
Sure.
of in a similar reflection that I have a passion of running, work, and then I also have a family to take care, and I always struggle with how do I balance it, because there's no balancing, right?
Right.
I mean, there's only priority, right? You can't be the greatest dad, you can't be
Yeah.
the most performing colleague, and you can't be the fastest runner,
Yeah.
right? What are the things, I don't know, so I don't want to ask you what has worked for you. I want you to rather say what are the things which didn't work, which you tried hard to do that load balancing, and it kind of didn't work and backfired. What things you attempted which kind of didn't work at all?
I think one of the main things that usually doesn't work. I mean, at least in my case, it hasn't worked. It's still not working. It probably will never work. Is to lead or to merge or to get into an activity with family, with your wife, which is not around running, work, or some of your or family, the core points. If you want to spend a easy Friday evening, that's never going to be. And even if you're out, your mind is somewhere else, physically you are somewhere else. So I think I find that the most difficult point when it comes to me. I've still not, I'm not still able to find an answer to it, because you could be out of running or out of any activity for 3, 4 months, but when you come back, the same question comes to haunt you. And there are going to be moments when you will have to say a polite no, or you will show your disinterest in some other way, which doesn't go well, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge that I face. And one of the biggest complaints is also most of our vacations are around running, which is not a great idea. Uh, but I think it's one of those things that one will have to find an answer in your own way.
Yeah, if the dad is a runner, you got to live with it. No, but which makes me have to ask you what has worked for you also, because you're not being a one-time wonder runner. Consistently sub 3 marathons, 255, very rare
Yeah.
occurrence for a amateur runner to do that at this level. Considering that you also have a very demanding professional life and a family. So what has worked for you in terms of doing that act of balancing?
So in the last 7, 8 years, I would say a few things. One is the person that I am with very less, I would say, external attractions. So I don't really go and spend too much time socializing or anything, because it doesn't come naturally to me. So I think that part is a little bit of cut off. So I have only limited things that I need to handle and do it the right way. So uh, life is almost boring,
Yeah.
but it's structured, and you can plan even 2 week well in advance, right? And you go and keep hitting it day after day, right? So that helps in running, in work, even in family. But yeah, sometimes it's boring, right? And it's uneventful.
Yeah, I mean, it's assurance to me, because I was telling someone the other day the same thing. Like for me, it's a boring life. It's the same template. Yeah, you got to get up in the morning, do the same things, go
Yeah,
back
yeah,
early in
yeah,
the
yeah.
bed, but you're happy with it, right? I mean, you're happy. You don't want to change a lot of things because it seems to be working for you, and you are having a good fun. So for an outsider, it's boring in the sense, but for
Yeah.
you, you're kind of dialed into it, and you're kind of going it in a certain cadence. You don't want to change things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something. I think that's something. So me and my daughter went to Kenya in March first half. We were there for 20 days in Eton. Uh, I mean, you get up in the morning, you run, you come back, eat breakfast. I get to work. maybe the evenings you go back to a little bit of a jog, and the day it continues. Very monotonous. A lot of people typically have asked me that you were in Kenya for 20 days. You didn't go for a safari, or you didn't go to a sanctuary to see some wildlife. I said no. I mean, it should have meant taking time off 2 days. I mean, it's a distraction. I mean, and I think I may not have enjoyed it, so I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how monotonous or how templatized the way it is. So that was one point which when you said what has worked for you, one point. The second has been the family, I would say, because it is also, I think, because there has been a little bit of sports on the other side. My family, especially my daughters, have gotten into running. I've tried to put them into cricket because that earns you more or that gives you more popularity, but they have simply refused to go.
You can't resist not being a middle class father.
Right. So they have refused to go for cricket coaching, etc. So they come back to athletics. So that gives us more time to spend together. Even Pavitra, my wife, she doesn't like running too much, but in some ways she likes doing multiple things in the area of fitness or sports. So that helps. The third thing which has helped in the last 7-8 years is obviously, the work that I'm doing. So I wouldn't have imagined 2013-14 that I would have the highest number of, I call them acquaintances, and some of them have become friends from the running circuit. Not because I run with a group too much or I kind of run together with somebody, but just because my work through Fast&Up involves being with the running community. So I think these three have helped me being in the running side of things. And the fourth thing, because of whatever I have been doing, has given me more exposure to interact with a lot of sports people or people in the ecosystem, which have just opened my mind. And when I look back, when I graduated from post graduation in year 2000, I would have loved to get into a profession or a career which would have made me eat, dream, think sports. But those were times when you didn't have many opportunities. So today, when you have had that late opportunity, you feel good. You feel that you are probably making up for those lost times, and it all rubs off on whatever you're doing. So these are the few things that have helped me in running.
So talk about the Kenya thing. I somehow get a feeling that that also has some links with, again, going back to the skill, picking skill development. It's about getting better as a runner, evolving as a runner. Of course, you had your daughter accompanying you. But was that in the mindset that how you get to the next level of being a more better runner, or was it just another bucket list that every runner has to go to attain?
So, not definitely the bucket list. So, in fact, I accompanied my daughter, not the other way around. My daughter is at least aspiring to be a competent mid-distance runner as she progresses, and her coach is in Kenya, based out of Eton. So it was also a time that she could have gone and met her coach, because during COVID it was all online, etc. So it also gives her the exposure to be there. And me having been in running obviously excited me more, and I kind of accompanied her. But obviously, at the back of the mind is also the interest to understand, learn more about what's happening. For me today, I think there's a limit to which I can improve or run fast, etc. I mean, that's the honest answer, right? I mean, you can't aspire, you can't cut off incredible number of minutes. So that's not my real attraction, even if I have to go to a Kenya or a Colorado or wherever it is. My interest lies more in talking to people, seeing how they work around. I call it my own personal interest when it comes to sports and running, in fact. So what I saw during those 20 days is something which I feel I wouldn't have gathered even if I had read 10 different books. The kind of knowledge that you get just seeing and interacting with people in that guest house during breakfast, lunch, and dinner is much more rewarding than sitting in India, browsing the internet, and reading 10 different textbooks. So I was lucky that I got that time of 20 days to be away from family, away from India, away from the usual time zones of work, to be there. Uh, but it was truly rewarding, and I think if I get an opportunity like that again, you still would like to go back, but I don't know whether I would get an opportunity like that.
Going back as a runner for high altitude training, or
Uh, I mean, as a runner, as one of the things, but just going back and spending another 3 weeks in
observing? Yeah,
Kenya.
yeah, yeah. Kenya, most people may know it's the home of champions, especially for long distance running. Most of the world record holders or winners of marathons come from Kenya, and you spend 20 odd days there. Now, running in Kenya is very different for what running in India is for, right? And it's odd in the sense that in Kenya, it's for survival. It's getting food on the plate. It's not as much for fitness. But in India, it's more recreational. It's fun. And at an elite level, you probably have very handful people in India who did it at a very elite level, right? What did you see culturally? What is working for people in Kenya, which you think perhaps if we can imbibe, even at a recreation level, we could have a much larger, richer foundation for years to come, for perhaps the next generations to come?
So I wouldn't want to get into the genetic aspect, etc.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to put that disclaimer,
I don't- because
physiology
I'm not-
apart. Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm not an expert in
Of
that.
course,
So
yeah.
don't
I mean,
even
we
want to-
don't talk about that people are born at X
I
thousand
don't
feet
want to
level.
touch into that aspect. But some of the other things that I see, which is very practical to India, is the sense of community. I think running there is a sense. There's a sense of community around. What I saw there was people willing to help each other, and that goes beyond the elite group or a subset of it. There would be hundreds and thousands of runners who would be running, say, a 220 or a 215 marathon out there. Uh, uh, but only the elite 2, 3 of them would win something at the Boston or the Berlin or the London, right? But there are so many other people out there training, enjoying their runs. So there's a community feeling out there where people are ready to help each other. That's number one out there. Uh, Second is, I think you would typically see, because of the community aspect, you would have a lot of groups training out there, right? Uh, uh, Third aspect is, uh, they don't have the required infrastructure that to make world champions, to make Olympians, right? But still, they were able to do it. Again, it goes back to that community and their ability to stick as a pack and to train on those dirt tracks. I mean, some of the stadiums that were around in Eton is as good as worn out, dilapidated stadiums that you could see anywhere in the rest of the world, right? So if you have to mirror that to India, I sometimes used to think, why can't we do this? Do a similar thing in India? You have similar kind of people. A lot of us say that India has a lot of talent out there, but we somehow don't get to that top rank. At least when it comes to running, I think what we lack is uh, the community, the pack, which requires uh, us to be at the best. When I say that, uh, let me qualify that. Okay, uh, around 2015-16, if you remember, when I was still around that 3 hour. I mean, I did once. I was hitting those 3:10s or something like that. I couldn't find even a single person who would be willing to run together to get to the next level, because I think everyone does things on their own. And one typically would feel that, I don't want to run as a pack for whatever reasons. But if that revolution had happened at that point of time, where you look at the 10 of best Bangalore runners come together on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, train, run together, during the long runs, I'm sure it would have been a different level altogether. Today we do that, but it's again in groups.
Yeah.
And even at the elite level, I think everyone trains separately. You would have an army team training separately. You would have some other people training separately. Even the top Indian 5 marathon runners wouldn't be training together.
Yeah.
Whereas you have the NN running team or some of the world's best training day in and day out together.
And these are technically everyone not at the same pace groups, right?
Not everyone at the
From
same
203 to perhaps 215.
Correct, right? So one of the fundamental things that I see, you can bring all the infrastructure, you can bring all the recovery mechanisms, etc. But till the time that community thing develops, at least when it comes to mid-distance, long-distance running, it's going to be a little difficult, because these are long-drawn patience, requiring patience and things to be developed over a period of time. So this brings back one more question that somebody asked me. I was describing a lot about Kenya and the experience, and finally, one of the smooth questions that came out was, okay, Eton is at a level of 2,400. So why would I waste so much of money and go to Eton, Kenya, to see all this? I would rather go to Uti.
Yeah.
I mean, the same altitude. But there are so many intangibles around which you simply can't replace in a place like Uti, and which answers a lot of things. So I think for me, the community and doing things together, even the exercises sometimes you see on the Instagrams, etc., where they do the drills, etc., it's all a lot of community feeling. The last one before I end this in this explanation, I can give you a live example. I mean, because of the work that I do, sometimes we also send some of our products to people we know in Kenya. So we support one or two sprinters there. Incidentally, Kenya is also doing good in 100 meters.
100 meters now.
Yeah. There was a 400 meters runner who likes our products, and he wanted a few more products. So there is no way to get it to them, right? I mean, if you send it through normal courier, has cost, etc., and the customs will ask questions, etc. So I pinged him saying that, boss, the thing is, you have a TCS 10K happening. There are a lot of Kenyans coming. So why don't you find somebody who can carry that product back with you? So incidentally, through some connects, he got hold of one of the persons who was ready to take those products back to him. And that gave me a sense that there was a willingness to be part of the community. You give
to help each other.
Help each other. So I think that's pretty important.
Is it also because, like we said, and this is getting into the trenches of running, because if you want to stand out, you got to be a 203, 205. No one possibly talks. In Kenya, if you are above 205, 206, no one wants to talk to you, right? You possibly end up becoming a pacer. And pacing itself is a rewarding job and an activity, right? You're constantly pacing someone to get better. And goes back to the point, like you said, in India, you don't have that culture. People are not coming together just because that we can help one guy, or as a community, as a pack, you can get better. So do you think that's also culturally, because in Africa, they have to come together because they know they can't be the top, but just staying around, they can get some reward. But in India, that nuance is not there, because either you are doing it for yourself or you're perhaps not doing you're just not doing. You're not doing it because there is some intrinsic reward attached anywhere.
I mean, to an extent, yes. But I think more importantly, I think in Kenya, it has become even though it's an individual sport, it has actually become a team sport.
Yeah.
So people know for sure that only a few people who do those 202s or 203s really will get rewarded. But everyone knows I need to get there, and I can only get there if I stay together. And finally, somebody will break out and reach there. But the person who reaches there doesn't forget the roots. So he or she will still help people around, and that's exactly what you see in some of those stories that
Yeah.
we see of the biggest guys around, etc. Of them helping
Yeah.
things back. So I think in India, to a large extent, a lot of sports is still individualistic.
Yeah.
Even if it's an individual sport, you can only succeed if there's a team around it. The reason why probably a cricket is at a far bigger level. I mean, you can leave alone what was the support that they get, the money that is there, but it all had to start somewhere. I mean, it started to a large extent because it was beginning to be a community sport.
Yeah.
Gully gully mein you had
Yeah.
people playing in the maidans of the country. People played, So it was becoming a community sport. So I think there is a need to develop running also into a community sport, which would eventually happen, I think.
Yeah. So I want to double click on your training. What is the Eklavya mode for you? What is the Eklavya mode training? I read that you follow that principle till date, I believe. What's that?
No, so I've not really run with too many people around. Not that I don't like to, but it's just that like, we talked about work, timing, and the need to travel. So I don't want to. I want to cut down on all those. So I uh, try to train alone. So till 2019, I did not have a coach. So I used to train on my own. So even now, obviously, a lot of things I do on my own, but you have to imbibe things from somewhere, right? So you see a lot of things around. It could be from you, it could be from somebody else, but there are some practices that could be good, and you would want to imbibe, right? A lot of times I see some runner, some people, even on the race on the road, doing certain things in a separate, in a different way. So you would want to try to imbibe those. So when I said, I think the Ekalavya mode sometime back, I meant getting those inputs from different people. If I have to give a quick example, in the last 3 months or 4 months, uh, when I went to Kenya, my first surprise was that there's hardly any infrastructure out there. People seem to be running on dirt tracks, dirt roads. And there are a few good tarmacs, but the tarmacs were typically used by the Muzungus. Muzungus were the Europeans or the English whites who used to go there because they found running more easier there. Typically, the Kenyans used to train quite a bit on dirt tracks. Uh, I found the reason that it made you more stable, the lot more strength, more endurance. So I was a guy who will never would like to go out on paths which are not clean and tarmac. So since coming back, I have run even my workouts, my intervals, my repeats on typically dirt tracks, dirt roads. Now it's something that nobody told me to do it, but something that I observed and which I imbibed, right? This is something that I imbibed after seeing that. There could be a lot of things that I hear something or I watch, and then you kind of experiment and start doing it yourself. So I think the Ekalavya mode is all the more important today because information can come through social media, can come through interacting, can come from coaches, etc. So it's always good to be in that mode because that helps you improve.
So you said for a long period of your running career, you were self-guided and then you kind of picked up a coach. So when you go out and pick a coach, what are the attributes you look at in deciding that this is what I need in a coach? And I'm sorry, I just want to explain, and that's more particularly because since you've involved yourself in multiple sports and you've seen a coach in cricket and football and badminton, right? Those evaluating factors, is there a common pattern in all of that has stemmed that okay, the same pattern applies in evaluating a running coach, or was there a new variable in looking for a running coach?
So I think there were just probably two things because I think, I mean, at the end of the day, we are not elite professional athletes who are going to do this day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
And so the needs of elite athletes, people who are in their 20s, etc., are going to be so different from people who are late in the 40s or something. So I think three things which are probably more important from my perspective is one, whether uh, uh, there's some amount of matching of wavelength uh, to the coach and you, and whether you would at the end of the day respect that person, because if you're not going to respect that person, then you're always going to be in the questioning mode. So I think the first and most important thing is whether I would be able to trust that person. So the ways of finding the trust could be multiple ways. Either you uh, you see what their credentials are, talk to them, etc. So that is number one. Two, whether that person is going to add value to you. In various forms. It is need not be just improving your time, because there is no guarantee that you will improve, right? But if there are different ways that person can improve, add value, that's enough for me. For me, getting a different perspective from what was doing 6-7 years was good enough for a coach to come and interject, right? Uh, uh, Third is obviously the cost, right? If you go outside and fetch a coach, it's going to be in dollars, right? So you'll have to see whether it is
Translating into affordable Indian coaching price. Yeah.
so that's going to be important, right? Um, but having said all that, for me, the most important was I was coming to a point where uh, I was doing certain things myself, and as you know, it's a lonely exercise.
Yeah.
And after a point of time, you needed some freshness into what you're doing.
Different perspective. Yeah.
The fun of working with somebody,
Yeah.
somebody planning out what you will be doing for the next 1 week, 2 weeks, so that you don't need to put that mind to it. So that's the reason why I went. But I can also safely say, even after having a coach, my interactions with the coach is not too much. I'm not a very interactive student, nor do I demand the coach needs to be giving me inputs. Uh, I get a structured plan. I ask a few questions once in a while. And I think after a point of time, the principles are the same.
Yeah.
It's about how you get there.
Yeah, I think coaching is also, I feel, is a very underrated that investment in life where people don't know till the time they get a coach. Uh, and so in your case, you've been coached, your daughter has been coached. What is the parallel you have seen in getting coached in a sport to getting coached in professional life? Like, I for a fact I believe that the biggest advantage of having someone mentor you is to tell you not what to do. To tell you what not to do, rather than to tell you what to do. It's so very easy for you to figure out what to do. But I think the biggest learning curve is that when you can minimize and eliminate those failure modes where you don't do something wrong and therefore you are not available to do the right things. And in running, for that matter, is you don't overtrain, or perhaps you don't do things which will make you injured and therefore keep you away from consistency, right? So do you see there's any parallel, and it applies both, because now you're seeing from the lens of a father who's getting coached, also an athlete who's getting coached, and I'm sure you're coaching folks in your organization. So do you think the parallels are same? Like,
I think the parallels in sports, business, work are all the same, right? There's so many lines that you can draw. Uh, so, coach or a mentor typically gives you a guidance or a pathway of achieving certain goals, right? And uh, you are reasonably certain that those that roadmap or the pathway has been experimented in is validated to a large extent to reach to a certain goal. So there is no guarantee to success, right? So you would assume that that mentor or person or the coach has that template or the roadmap which is validated. uh, but so can many people give it, right? And some people finally end up successful, 1 out of 10 people, and then you can go back and say you had a wonderful coach and you work together. But the same coach, when he or she trains somebody else, may not be successful for multiple reasons, right? First, I think the expectations have to be clear. Uh, the second thing in both work as well as sports is that uh, you need a mentor, you need a coach uh, to basically interact, to basically help, to basically be a sounding board. Uh, a lot of times, you are either hesitant to go to multiple people, or if you go to multiple people, you get 5 different inputs. So I think you need somebody who you think is the best guide, and trust. If you feel that you have a mentor or you have a coach, but you start listening to 5 different people, then it's
Yeah.
a self-befitting
Yeah.
purpose. The third important perspective, at least when it comes to my kids, I think I've seen this even in adults, is that when people give you the same opinion and you are close to them as a friend or as a father or as a brother or a mother, uh, they don't value things. They don't take it seriously. They, in fact, question. Um, but when the same opinion comes from the coach or the mentor, it's taken as more of a gospel truth.
Yeah.
So I think there are similar things in both sport and but I think it's important to have some mentor. I would say. I mean, you don't really typically need a coach after a point of time, if but you still may need a mentor or whatever.
It's funny, as you were saying about the thing, I was kind of reflecting back. It happens to me often when I'm giving, not really giving opinions or advice, but I'm generally telling my dad what you should eat and what you should not eat. He takes me for granted and he doesn't know. But when he goes to a doctor and he pays him a consultation fee and the doctor says that, look, your glucose is going spike and you should not do that, he would listen to him. So it's a weird, I would say, human behavior concept that, I mean, and I mean, I mean, as I say, I don't know whether what's the answer to it, but I think, yeah, I mean, we could probably just agree that it's a behavioral thing in humans. Uh, so for all your sub 3 marathons, what's also interesting is that there has been a lot of hardships and downsides, right? There have been quite a few DNFs, and in running parlance, DNF means did not finish, and that's big um, a big blow to a runner. Also because you go through a very excruciating 10 to 12 to 16 weeks of training and you show up for a race, and for whatever reasons beyond your control, it doesn't go your way. For some people, it could be that you don't achieve a certain goal time, and for some people, you cannot finish.
Sure.
And it has happened few times with you. Uh, and it has happened in instances where perhaps you've also traveled to a different country with a lot of aspirations of finishing a certain goal time, right? And knowing you, I would perhaps can visualize that there was a lot of process and training structure to go there, get that goal done, and move on. When you went through those hardships, I want you to kind of open up some mental models, essentially. What were the mental models for you to introspect, come back? What were the points you kind of thought through to say that, okay, do I think about what went wrong, or do I think why it went wrong so that I can inculcate and move on to my next training block? So what were your mental models? How do you bounce back from these downsides?
So there were, if I look back, there were 3 big instances, I would say, which there was a DNF. The first one was in Mumbai, 2015 or 16, I think.
Yeah.
So I have always been I've had asthma throughout, and it's lingered. Some medication helps, but I think in 2015 or 16, just before the marathon, I was wheezing, etc. So there was no way I could finish a marathon, but I tried my luck. started going at a pace which would have taken me to a 310 or something those days. But there was no way I could do that. So I backed off in 21, 22 kilometers. So a medical problem or issue, I mean, it's very easy to introspect and find an answer to. But I think the learning from that was not to be foolish. You kind of don't try your luck too much, and it's better to back off rather than go into a battle uncooked, right? Uh, but more importantly, the last two, it's not DNFs, but where I haven't succeeded or where I haven't met my expectations has been two New York marathons, and
That's a nemesis for now.
and you have rightly said it costs going all the way, the registration fees in dollars and whatnot, and so a lot of people ask why this one of going running, etc. That's a different discussion, right? Uh, but when I look back, I think New York has been for me a highly technical course. Uh, uh, I think the more I think about it, uh, there are doubts with every passing year, and my goal has been to do all the world majors in under 3 hours. And I think New York is going to be the most difficult one, considering that I've got London and Tokyo left, and I've not succeeded in New York for the last 2 years. I mean, two attempts. Highly technical course. The weather can vary a little bit. Uh, so the only way that I think I can succeed there is if you are super trained and you go into that with enough cushion with you, which would mean that if I have to even hit a 3 hour mark, I have to be prepared to go to 250, 252.
Yeah.
Uh,
So have the buffer.
to have the buffer or the confidence to go and attempt, given all the costs and the training hardships that you go through. So it is going to be a. I mean, I mean, I have to be honest, upfront with you that the two occasions has been a little tough because you went through all the process thinking that everything will go well, and then it broke down. The last time, I mean, I think I met you just after the Bangalore half marathon, which was on October 16th, and this was on November 6th. And on October 16th, I remember that I'd done one of my best times of 123 in the last 5 years. Very well trained, good, and super confidence. Uh, but there was injury lurking underneath, which just exploded, which put me out of action for next 2 3 months, in fact, through a L4 L5 injury. So that was unfortunate. And so I think when I look back, I think I will go back. I will still do it, not in a half-assed way. When I say that I'll go back, it is not something where I'm foolish, uh, 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 but I think it can be done even with passing age. Uh, but I think I need to make sure that I go there in the best prepared manner. When that will be, how that will be, I still don't know that window, because whether it is going to be 2025 or 2026, I don't know, because it happens once in a year in November. You have to get a entry based on your times in early that year. You have to be injury free. You have to be training well. You have to stay fit for a couple of more years. So all that comes into play. So today, when I look back on those two runs, I mean, I have done a lot of introspection, etc. But simply, it has come down to be to just telling me that you being lucky on that day will not get you through. You have to be good,
Good. Yeah.
as against London or a Tokyo or somewhere else where luck would give you that leeway of few minutes, right? Here it's not going to be the case, so you have to be at your best, and that's exactly what I'm not trying to do now. So this year, that's the plan to get back. I don't know whether it'll happen in 24 or 25, but that's the broad game plan.
So in these situations when things don't go the way you had originally envisioned for, do you think it's mostly, for example, when I look at certain goals, the two variables for me is either I'm underprepared or I didn't set reasonable goals. Which is kind of also intertwined because you set super high goal to yourself, you're obviously going to fall short of your preparation, right? The third factor which I'm starting to realize now is those unknown factors which is beyond your control. Let's say in an example like Boston Marathon, right? Where you can be super trained, but you can't be super trained for the course, because the course you can train technically for the elevations or the downhills, but weather is something which is beyond your control, right? So when you look back on these instances, Mumbai, New York, or for that matter any race which didn't go the way you want, do you think the factors are mostly in those knowns, which are, again, like I said, the under preparation or perhaps not setting the reasonable goal, which is the first principle, or always missing out on the unknown factor?
So this a very interesting question. I have this dialogue with so many people, even including my daughter. So I've played cricket as well as running. So I think running is probably the only sport. I mean, along with maybe swimming, but running for simplicity's sake is where most of the things are under your control. I mean, there's nothing that is beyond your control because you exactly know what you are capable of when you come into that race, and only you can blow it up, right? More often than not, except if the weather is factor is there.
Yeah.
Weather factor is something that is I'm keeping it aside.
Yeah, but you also technically also train for the weather because you know what weather you're going to.
So I'm saying the
for.
weather, let it be 20 degrees centigrade or 15 degrees centigrade. That is more or less certain until unless you have a Boston kind of thing which happened in 2018 or 18, I think 18 or 19. The rest of the things are all under your control. There is no way that anything can go wrong until unless you think something different during the course of the run, or you come in with an injury knowing that the injury is there, but it'll blow up. So you know what the conditions are, right? So you could cramp, etc. That's a different thing, but that again goes back to your training. And if you've done 10 different training runs, the chances are high that you won't cramp during the actual run. As against a sport like cricket, I mean, you watched yesterday's game. Some days you leave a ball like what Shubman Gill did. I mean, the ball could have not even hit your wicket. But if it's a beauty of a ball, it'll come and hit the wicket and you are gone, right? Or there could be a spinner who is turning the ball 90 degrees. You can do nothing against it. In a sport like badminton, if on an odd occasion, if the opponent is very strong or gets lucky, there is one more degree that acts. But when it comes to running, the opponent is not going to hit you out of the game, right? Yeah. So to that extent, I think running is much more certain. But I think a lot of times, what I feel is the way you have trained, the way you have underestimated certain things and factored it into your training would have been the difference. For example, in the first New York attempt, I can clearly tell you that I used to live in Hyderabad, and my entire training was done on a flat stadium. I used to do my 25 kilometer, 26 kilometers just circling the stadium, possibly also because that gave me a false sense of confidence that I'm hitting my targets. And when I actually went out into a race or a place which had different situation, I was not able to cope up with it. It's same in business.
Yeah, I was just about to tell you, it just resonates everything in life. Yeah.
I mean, you could make your Excel sheets, but when you go into the actual work environment, it could be different. But having said that, I think running in a way, a lot of things can work. If you are running a pace, hitting a pace of say 4:30 consistently during training, the chances are high that you can replicate it. The only way it can go awry is if you do a mistake. It's not because the opponent has done anything different.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's what the beauty of this sport is, because there are so many dots which are connecting not just to the sport, but perhaps to your life, to your work. And like we were saying in the beginning, I think the thread which ties a lot of recreational runners, when I talk to a lot of people, is that the discipline and the ability to create a project around even just running to achieve a certain goal is kind of resonating to everything in life. So, so yeah, I mean, so yeah, this is fun. So, so quickly, if if you want to double click on your training routine, let's say out from marathon, typically you would have a 16-20 week. At a very macro level, how do you kind of phase out that 16-20 weeks and leading up to a typical marathon race?
So for me, training is typically throughout the year. So when it gets to near the marathon, it's going to be marathon specific, maybe a block of 16 or 12. The way I'm seeing it is now is I would typically do whatever reasonable mileage that you are doing, have maybe 2 quality sessions a week. Uh, I've never done a 35-kilometer mileage in my training sessions. I've stopped at 32. So my idea is to go to a 32 or 35 to experiment with that in the coming season, etc. And then leave a clean taper. So as against 6-7 years back when you had a three week, I used to love taper because your work is done, you're relaxing and getting into a marathon. But I think nowadays taper is also getting smaller.
Yeah.
So probably I have to switch to that mode, maybe a 2 week taper or whatever. But around the race days and the times, my schedule is more or less the same as it was 7-8 years back, which is I don't want any unexpected things to happen around it. So it's going to be well planned. My trips to whichever place is going to be well planned. I already know where I'm going to stay. Uh, uh, get into if it is abroad, I typically go there 4-5 days before just to make sure that your sleep cycles are okay. If it's India, go there a day or 2 days before. My routine of sleep is going to be the same. Get as much as sleep as possible. My nutrition is going to be the same. Uh, my the way I lead up to it in terms of my strength, etc. Typically, I avoid strength, etc. in the last week or so, simply because I go get those niggles from somewhere. So how to avoid that? Maybe get a massage or something leading into that week. So all those things are going to be the same. It's just that the block is going to be a little different. I think it's going to be vastly different this time, whenever it is going to be, than what I have done previously.
So Vijay, we spoke a lot about physical training. I want to change gears and talk about mental training, which I also feel is vastly underrated, but has immense top line value in sports, personal life, professional life. Right? What has been your toolkit over the past few years, which you've kept on compounding, which you just have to keep replicating, not just during the season, but off season, which is kind of a steady toolkit for generally your mental health. So what seems to be those things what you're doing which is kind of helping you in your mental health? I'm sure no one could claim that they are always in the best of their mental health, but what seems to be working for you? What are your toolkits?
So a few things. I think Dilip, I think there's no golden standard, right? Because I think I can tell a few things, but it need not be the way to success. Because I think I see a lot of immensely successful people who later come back and say, I mean, I wish I could have handled the mental side of things well, etc. So, but I think whatever I would be thinking is not a way to success in any form, even in marathon running or in work or elsewhere. But things that I do typically is that, I mean, some of the things that are core of what I generally do, I practice when it comes to the mental aspect as well, which is one is staying grounded, right? I feel a lot of times when you're not grounded, when you think a lot of temporary things are your reality, then there is an expectation mismatch. For example, when you're working in some place, you get a lot of perks, and you start to believe that those perks are you, right? It's going to be there for the rest of your life. It could be traveling in a business class, traveling in, I mean, staying in your five-star accommodations, etc. One day you pull that out, you don't know what to do,
Yeah.
right? So I think call it a little old fashioned, or the way I've been, I mean, or sport, for example, whatever it is. Staying grounded is something that can help you even mentally, because a lot of your mental the mismatch comes because of
Yeah.
these expectations, right?
Yeah.
uh, the second thing that I think I try to practice a lot of times, I'm not able, I may not be able to, is the ability to get out of that situation that you are in. A lot of times every day you could be in business situations, business problems that I mean, the sales are not happening to the extent that you need to be in, or have a problem to solve at home which you have no control over, or when it comes to running, things are not going the way it is, especially if it's to do with, say, my daughter, or certain expectations, etc. But the fact of the matter is that you at that point of time cannot solve it. You can do whatever you want, but you simply will not be able to solve it. So just understanding that and getting out of that uh, has helped me. So a lot of times when I switch off, I can sleep peacefully for 7 8 hours
Wow.
and get up, and then the problem still stays, but you kind of get back afresh. And a lot of times I find that problems or situations also have this tendency to solve by itself without you doing much, right? So that has helped or will help, I think. The third, I think, is patience. A lot of times I think you need to be patient. There are no overnight results. I'm at least I am not a believer in overnight results. It could happen with a few people, even in business, even in sport. But most of the people like me, or like a lot of us, are not supremely talented overachievers that you can get to a certain point overnight. So understand that and keep putting in your efforts, and you will eventually go there. Uh, these would be my normal place things that I would suggest and I practice. And the last element would be, uh, I think, even in terms of relationships and friendships, in terms of uh, uh, getting acquainted with people. Uh, I think it's very important that for me, at least, what has worked is not to overinvest, not to expect, because then there's a mismatch out there. So I think what comes out in all these things is that when there's a mismatch between expectations
Expectations.
and what you achieve. So to a large extent, if you can manage that, I think you are mentally pretty peaceful.
Yeah, I was thinking as you saying that, I think as someone is saying, the expectation is the root cause of misery in life. So if you can nail that out, you're perhaps you're the
Yeah,
most sorted
yeah,
person. It would be incomplete to have the training component miss, as we spoke mental, we physical, nutrition. So at a very overarching level, because I understand often nutrition is a subject which is also abused, and people often get to lap it to say that what seemed to have worked for you, I would want to apply it on myself. So it's very individualistic. But at a very overarching principle level, what I like to know is that what's your guardrail around nutrition? Is it, and what I mean by here is it a means for you to kind of replenish what the damage has gone through your body, which could be because of stress, training, whatever causes in life? Or is it another source and tool to perform and get better, both physically and mentally? So, how do you look at nutrition? And I don't want, specific in macros and micros, because that's very, very specific. But what are your principles when you look at nutrition?
So for me, it's been very simple, right from as being a kid. Right, I grew up in a in a household vegetarian, tambram. So curd rice was a go-to stuff, and I played sport. So there was no way I could be strong and achieve anything in sport, right? So that was a perennial point right through.
That's the reason you realize very early it's all about skill and not
You can
strength
only,
and power.
yeah, you can only bridge the gap through a little bit of skill.
Play by your strings.
Right. But I think it's also important to realize that nutrition is where the gap has been. And so the first and fundamental thing right from them, and it grew as I evolved, and is understand there is a gap. There can be gaps. And if you need to fulfill that, you need to be open. You need to be flexible. That flexibility can come from the kind of food that you eat. So a lot of people are open to exploring meat and non-vegetarian options. So I am not I don't sit in judgment to say I don't have it, but I don't sit in judgment to say that you should not be having it, right? So first and foremost is being open to options available, right? Which includes dietary supplements, right? So that's the premise on which I think I believe I continue to work. And when I interact with a lot of sportsmen and a lot of general public, it's also it's that nutrition is a very fundamental tool or part in improving either the performance of the elites or improving the, the, the level of activity in everyone's life, right? Recovery, sleep, etc. is separate. But so this is important, and that has to be realized and now solve it.
Yeah.
Once you have understood that the needs to be solved and you need to be flexible, then it's pretty simple. Then I think it's just a question of choice.
Yeah. What do you do? What's best for you?
What best for you? I think I find it a little tough when people start being prejudiced or judgmental when it comes to nutrition, to products or to brands or to the way or what you eat. As long as one is open to it, I think one gets to a better life, and that's proven. This aspect is proven by elites, by general public, or the people around you. You can call it eat healthy, eat safe, eat nutritious food, etc. But finally, doing this is a simple way. How you tackle it is to each one's own.
Yeah. So a lot of you, Vijay, as we speak, there were a lot of other anchors and protagonists who kind of made who you are. And I'm sure from childhood it was parents, your siblings. Like I was saying you offline, I often cross paths with your younger brother, who also happens to be a runner. And I think the most common anchors today are your two daughters and your wife, right? And we started the conversation saying that your daughters are also into running, and I think the elder one is pursuing to be a competitive runner. Do you think the fabric for her to pursue running, or for that matter any sport, has stemmed from seeing the dad or both the parents active, or that was the primary reasons, or it just, she went through her kind of corridors and figured out that's what her calling was.
Uh,
That's okay. Yeah, cool.
yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a mix of few things. In our case, it's just because we have been into it. That's how I can look at it and justify it. Because I think many times, uh, uh, what if I had been very active in cricket, for example? There's a high likelihood that they would have picked up the bat and the ball first.
First, yeah.
Uh, so, to a large extent, when it comes to our daughters, their inclination to uh, running possibly has been because of the environment that we have been, and to sport also because of that. But outside of this, there's also a huge world where you suddenly put kids into activity or sport. They suddenly get the knack of it. They suddenly pick up it because they are talented or they are interested. And that's how you get a different set of talent pool out there. So today what we are seeing is, in our case or in my case, it's been homegrown and nurtured. But there's also a lot of others who are coming from a different pool set.
So the reason why I wanted to ask this is because today morning I read a news piece which said that the rate of obesity amongst kids in India is at a very alarming level. It's almost to a level where it should probably be called as a national emergency, right? And often I found is that kids are essentially the small mirror of the parent. They essentially do what the parents say, right? The kid, if the parents are on mobile, kids naturally will have an inclination on mobile, and I see that at my home very naturally, right? So if I'm watching TV, my 2-year-old will come and say he also wants to watch TV, right? But if I'm reading book, he would also want to go and grab his book and read. Now he knows that I'm a runner. He doesn't run obviously, but he kind of shows those antics that he also wants to run, and he does those exercises. And I somehow feel that's very important for a foundational fit society and country, because one way is that approach where you are not active and fit, but you want your kid to be active and fit. That's not going to happen. That's like the age-old version where every parent wants their kid to be a doctor or an engineer. But if you have a foundation where you are a healthy, and definition of healthy and fit could be subjective, but if you're in a healthy household, your kids and the future generation would quite naturally kind of pick on that characteristics.
No, that's true. I mean, it goes without saying that if you are in that environment, there's a high likelihood that the kids will pick up the habits that they have. But I think there are a few things that is happening right now when I look at parents, etc. First, I think there is one set of parents who think they have missed out on sport in their growing up years, and who want or who encourage their kids to take up sport for whatever reason, because they see it on TV, or they see someone. But I see a lot of people putting in that time to wake up early in the morning at 5 and standing around and getting their kids trained or whatever, help them play. The only caveat there is a lot of times there's also a lot of pressure out there, which, I mean, if we can take it out some way, it's good for the society. But then there is another set of parents and I think population or pool. I mean, you mentioned about people looking at mobiles, etc. But at the same time, there is also a lot of pressure on academics right now. And unlike 20, 25 years,
Yeah.
to get in an engineering or to get into one of those professional streams, I'm told kids have to start at the age of, I mean, 9th standard, 10th standard,
Yeah.
where they get into integrated programs, etc., which leaves no time for them to even practice sport.
Yeah.
So I think as long as the parents are able to also have expectations in a decent, in a reasonably good way for their kids, and what they think is an ideal output growing up, one can balance both. And I think when I talk to a lot of people, probably the Scandinavian countries have done well in this.
Yeah.
In fact, even in sport, people advise you against specialization too early at the age. So in India, even if you are playing sport, there's a lot of pressure on specialization because you want a certain output.
Yeah.
Because you see a certain
Measured as an outcome. Yeah.
certain Sindhu who has won an Olympic medal. So you want somebody to be a badminton player to achieve a certain goal. So you want them to specialize at the age of 12 or 13, which is a huge disservice to that kid or child.
Yeah.
So I think even sports has to be done in a certain way where they have to experiment with multiple sport, and then they eventually will take up to something. Even if it's at the age of 16 to 18, they still have a decade or more to achieve things, which is pretty okay in the current scope of sports.
Yeah. Uh, uh, do you have a superpower?
I don't.
No?
I don't believe in sports superpowers.
No superpower. I thought you would say the superpower is that fast dad and fast daughters you're putting together. What is this one thing you feel if you could add to your routine could perhaps multiply your health quotient to X whatever 10x 5x you want. So one thing which you've been trying hard to inculcate, but if you could, it could just add on to your overall health quotient.
Uh, health is holistic, the way I put it. What again, going back to skill and the aptitude and affinity towards it. If you look at my family, my daughters, they also like a little bit of music, art, etc. That's something that I have not inculcated. Maybe being in a all boys school throughout, being in a all boys family throughout. Sport took center stage and then academics. So I think the element of having a little bit more affinity towards art, music, that side, I think would make you more rounded than now. And at times, I think having a little bit more uh, uh, expression of emotions would make you more healthy. These are the two things.
Oh yeah, quite interesting because it's you never because playing music for a lot of people is meditative. It calms them down, and maybe art and that could be a source. For some people, it's actually doing meditation using an app. For some people, it could be doing that. That's very interesting. What is one thing which you feel is annoying about yourself, which you've been trying hard to get rid of it, you've not been able to yet?
I think I find myself boring.
So, but you are boring.
Yeah, but I want to.
But you want to be interesting.
I feel to be exciting and interesting.
Yeah. So, are you boring to yourself or are you boring to others?
I think I find myself boring to. Obviously, I know why I'm boring, but I do want to try and see if I can be more
interesting,
more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem to impress yourself that you are no more boring. Yeah, if you could crack that, yeah, that's a big deal. No, this has been super fun, Vijay. I think one of the reasons why, like I said, I wanted to sit down together, have this conversation was to kind of unpack the other side. You're known mostly for being, of course, very few people would know you. You're an ace marathoner in the running world. But for large part, you're known as a corporate executive, as an entrepreneur, running one of India's largest nutrition brand, Fast&Up. But there's this unique identity of yours, like I said, being an ace, studious marathoner who's trying to get better. And my curiosity was to kind of unpack and put it out there so that people could also relate that it's always useful to have one other side of yours to kind of go parallel with your career, your personal life. And you seem to have done that very well for last many years. So this has been super fun to unpack that. A lot of people, I get feedback that people who listen and watch are also startup entrepreneurs, people who want to build out something. You're building out one of our finest brands. If you had a wish list for someone to build out something, let's say in the health and wellness category, which you've always been looking to think that if someone could build that out, would you have some kind of wish list that one or two things you would love to see in India in particular, someone building it out in this category?
Not specific, Dilip, that I would think, but amongst things that I'm seeing, I think there is a lot more technology now coming into health, and I've actually worked in the pharmaceutical sector for a lot of years, so I know the drug industry a little bit, etc. So I think for a lot of time, people have been trying to get technology into health, and a lot of people have been successful. But I think we still have not come out with a single brand or a product uh, which actually intertwines everything together in a well-oiled, successful manner uh, that I would wish to see. But it's probably some years or a few years away only. But if somebody can, and I hope the ecosystem and the even investment community is there to help
Yeah.
build it, because today what one lacks is patience.
Yeah.
If somehow that can happen, then truly you will be having something which is built rather than having so many different plugins, all which can potentially add up, but not having that complete piece which can add value to one's health or life.
Do you think some just to kind of make it more relatable, any other brand which comes your mind, someone who might have done this in some other industry which you could reflect in this space?
I mean, in a lot other older spaces, you have brands. Like if you take banking, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you have the big guys like the ICICAs of the HDFC, the HSBCs who have been there, who probably give a well-rounded
Okay.
solution. If you have the consumer space, you have the Tatas, you have the Reliances who have done.
Yeah.
So I think health and added to that technology, I understand it's still a space where people are still toying with ideas.
Yeah.
But you still need to have a well-oiled kind of thing. For a case in point is you have hospitals trying to get into a little bit of technology, but still the hospitals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of technology guys trying to see fantastic ideas, maybe trying to measure one part of one side of things.
Yeah.
But finally, it all gets into a back end, which is
Yeah.
still very debatable or subjective.
Yeah.
So I still find, but it's more of an evolution phase, right? And eventually we'll get there.
Yeah. Since you're a runner, I had to ask you this. If you wanted to go back to history and you got an opportunity to ask someone out, perhaps someone non-living, who would that be? You could go out for a run, and where would you want to go for a run with that person?
It's a difficult question, honestly, but having seen running initially in the 80s and possibly in those track events, uh, I mean, if I have to just live a dream, if probably I could go back to say, I mean, it's a little wishful thinking, but maybe lining up for an Olympics in those 80s with maybe a Sebastian Coe or a Steve Cram, because those were the people I initially saw as a kid. If I had an opportunity to do that in a track, maybe a 1500 or whatever, that would probably be a great time to relive.
Wow, that reminds me. Do you have a 1500 PR?
So this is a very interesting thing. I have not counted my PRs early in my growing days, etc., because there's no need to. So in the last 7 years, I had an occasion to do a 1500, and it was 4:48.
Wow.
So I believe that I could have done better when I was
Wow.
early.
Yeah.
So incidentally, that's something that I tease my daughter with. Now that she's getting better and better, so I think that's something that she has to first beat before she can go on and improve further.
Yeah, so Sharanya, if you're listening and watching, you have to beat dad, and good luck for that. But this is super fun, Vijay. Thank you for taking time today. What's next in the marathon career? What's the big that X goal or a bucket list you have in the near future you are chasing for?
So quickly, Tokyo 2024 is going to happen in March, which is a deferment from this year. I would still like to see if I can have the ability to complete the list of world majors under three. The other broader goal is I'm 47. I mean, 50 would be in 2025. So 3-4 years more of running marathons and all the road races at a proficiency which translates into time at the same levels, if not better, to what I have done in the last 5-7 years. So that's the broad goal.
No, all the best, Vijay. I know you haven't put any numbers, but I'm hoping that streak of sub 3 continues for all your world majors and continues as long as you stay competitive and dialed into the sport of running. Super fun to sit down and have this conversation with you. I had a lot of learning, both from as a runner and otherwise, and that was the intent. And I am hoping people, listening and watching could also have some cues. People who want to reach out to you for any tips, inputs, or perhaps get some discount coupons for Fast&Up, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
I think they can probably tweet directly to me, or my number is not so difficult to get to. If they can directly message me either on my social media or my LinkedIn or my Instagram page or whatever, so it's easy to get me.
Perfect. So, Vijay, thank you. Pleasure it was. And I hope to sit down again once all the world major streak is done and kind of reminisce all the experiences of training and, marathoning.
Thank you, Dilip. I would like to say that this has been a unscripted conversation. So I did not expect the questions and the interaction to go in a non way. I mean, a way which I'm used to in the last 5-6 years. So I think we have touched upon points which I have not done so much in any conversation. So glad that we could go through it, and all the best for your podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.